Okay. Where are we? All right. Okay, I think we got most people. If you need a cup of coffee, go on, get it, and come on up front. We'll get started. Next, we'll be hearing from a panel about virtualization, virtualized networks, and cloud-based services. Looking forward to this panel also. Leading the discussion is Iain Gillott, President of IGR and Market Strategy Consultancy, focused on the wireless and mobile communications industry. Iain has been involved in the wireless industry for many, many years, over 20 years. I think I'm not going to tell how many years, but it's at least 20, right? He's been a friendly face at CCA, and we really appreciate his presence and his candor. And I think he's probably one of the more interesting, forward-looking analysts in the wireless world, and we're very glad to have him. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me turn it over to Iain Gillott and let him introduce his panel, and it's all yours, Iain.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And good morning, everybody. I think there's coffee at the side. There you go. There's a big line over there. That one was empty earlier on. Okay, so today we've got 4 speakers here, you can see, and what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to give it to them in a few seconds here and have each of them introduce themselves. Jim, Steve, Miguel, and Glenn. And then what I'm going to do is ask them each a question. They can introduce themselves, answer that question, then we'll get into the Q&A. But obviously what we're talking about here is virtualized networks, Cloud RAN, mobile edge computing, you may have NFV, all these wonderful acronyms, technologies. And essentially what we're talking about is ripping apart a network and rebuilding it using off-the-shelf, low-cost hardware, commercially available software, et cetera, et cetera. So we make, I hate to say this, but I will, we make our networks look more like a Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, etc. And no, it's not that easy. But the point being that we try and we start to simplify the network, etc. A lot of companies involved in this. I think we've got probably the 4 leading ones here today, and we'll talk about what they're doing. I've got a set of questions here. We're not going to do any PowerPoint. We're going to keep this pretty simple. And we do have some time here to open it up to the audience for questions. I've got enough questions to fill the time. Normally at this time I would say something like, Steve Berry will pay $5 for every question you ask. But that's not really true. It's kind of, the check is in the mail, right? So, but given the entertainment last night on the dance floor in the reception, I kind of turned that into, for every question you ask, I think we can get Steve to do a dance at next year's show. Uh-oh. So we're not going to get any questions now? I actually offered last night, I think the CCA could generate additional revenue by having a raffle for Steve to dance at last night's show. But anyway, so, all right, so let's start with the intro. And what I'm going to do is ask, Glenn, we'll start with you and go down. First question, very easy. Who are you? What do you do? And how virtualized networks are progressing, how we can move to a cloud RAN. What are your views on the subject? Let's start at the top level.
You want all of that right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got 5 minutes.
Let me walk out and we're done.
Good morning. So I'm Glenn Laxdal. I'm the CTO and head of strategy for the North American region for Ericsson, responsible for the introduction of new technologies and the growth strategies that we have to drive those new technologies in the region. And I would say that there's probably no more transformative set of technologies that we're working on in the industry right now than this prospect of taking these technologies, network function virtualization, software-defined networking that have emerged in the data center that did allow Amazon and Google and Microsoft to scale to these unbelievably elastic levels, and to also scale down the cost curve, so dramatically. Just look at Amazon and the way that they've been able to get down the cost curve as they've been ramping their data center infrastructure. 80% cost reduction on a given workload in 2013, 50% cost reduction on a given workload in 2014. Again, looking at a 50% cost reduction on a given workload in 2015. The only way that you can get to that is by making your data center infrastructure programmable, software defined, elastic. And so naturally the telecom industry looks at this and says that the new wave of competitors that we're ultimately going to be facing is really going to be coming from the web scale players. And so if that new wave of competition is coming from the web scale players, perhaps we can take a look at the technologies that have worked so well in the data center space and move those into the network. And that's indeed what's happening. We'll take the concept of network function virtualization, drive it into the network, put a virtualization layer between the physical network infrastructure that has until now been optimized for the application that runs on top of it, put a virtual abstraction layer in there so that I can now run those network functions on top of the virtualization layer, which is on top of COTS hardware. And now I can scale out that COTS hardware in my data centers as dynamically as I need to. And then the second element is software-defined networking, making the network more programmable so that I don't need to have teams of engineers that are setting up network paths from the data center to the enterprise or from the data center to the consumer. I can do that dynamically in software. And the combination of those two, network function virtualization and software-defined networking, can fundamentally transform the network. And I think the key message to the smaller carriers is that while you may not have gone too far down this path yet, I think it's an inevitable path that we all as an industry will go down. It's clearly started with some pretty big operators globally, Telstra, Telefonica, NTT Docomo, SKT, Vodafone, in North America, AT&T, Verizon, and as well some smaller carriers are starting to test the concept. So I think that it's inevitable that this wave will be pretty dramatically impactful on the network over the next 5 years.
And actually, one of the questions I've got is, we'll get into specifics about what can smaller operators do here to accelerate that. So,
absolutely.
Miguel?
I agree. So, anyway, I'm Miguel Dajer, and with Huawei, and I have a small team of researchers in the US, and my job is really to, take all the things that my colleague just said and really make a reality in terms of developing architectures, technologies, software, hardware, whatever it might be, standardization, et cetera, to drive it into what we call longer-term evolution, which is, people say, okay, we got a long-term evolution, somehow we need a new thing now, so I call it longer-term evolution, which is 5G. But the path from now to where that is, or what the promise of 5G will be, it will be filled with a number of new technologies. And NFV and what I call NFC, network function cloudification, it's really one of the key components, or one of the early components that we can start deploying to enable operators to be more agile, more flexible, be able to start deploying services on the networks in a more rapid way. And we'll get into how can CCM members benefit from this. We'll discuss some of the benefits of these technologies. But the all-appliance model that we all know from the telecom side has served us very well. Very good products, very efficiently developed, tied to the hardware. That model now is evolving, and it's important that everyone here understands that they need to have a plan, if they haven't started, to really start transforming the network if they want to remain competitive. And we can discuss exactly how many steps on how you can do that and where to start. We all have our opinions on that, but that's perhaps a good topic to discuss later on.
Okay. Jim?
Hi, my name is Jim Tindall. I work for Alcatel-Lucent. I'm part of the IP routing and transport division. I run the consulting, engineering, and business development functions for North America. A lot of what I've been doing, and by the way, I do agree with everything that the previous panel members have said, But a lot of my function now is really to really work with the customers and understand not just NFV, but really what I would like to call NFO, which is network function optimization. And where does NFV fit and where does it not fit? Because it's certainly something that we all talking about. We know that the network's going to go in that direction, but it doesn't necessarily solve all problems. And part of the pragmatic approach that we try to take to this is to offer products in both the virtualized format as well as non-virtualized format and see which ones makes the most sense. And there's certainly functions that lend themselves very well to virtualization. Packet core, for instance. Control plane functions are very well suited for virtualization. The elasticity, the ability to apply resources to control plane problems in real time are dramatic solutions to problems. When I look at the data plane, however, it's not necessarily the case. And here is where you really need to look at what technology makes the most sense. Where you have a very heavy data plane component, sometimes virtualization is not the right answer, or it's not the optimal answer in any case. So really the job now is to understand how quickly we go to some of these new technologies, where to apply them, and how to really best optimize the network overall.
Okay, Steve?
I'm Steve Northridge from Oracle Communications, and quite often when I go to trade shows, the first question I ask is, why is Oracle here? You're a database company. So I get tired of answering that question, but we're in Oracle Communications. We're a specific industry business unit that's focused on communications. And I think talking about a virtualization, you can see why everybody's interested in. We brought up a lot of the factors about cost, lowering CapEx, the idea that you're going to use commercial off-the-shelf hardware, presumably you're going to use less of it. There's lower operational costs, potentially because lower deployment costs and so forth. But in the context of communication service providers, you really have to talk about NFV, as already been mentioned here, as part of the story. I mean, NFV is a very important component when you talk about virtualization. We thought, for instance, it was going to be about cost. Why are people going to NFV? We thought for sure it's related to virtualization. It's going to be strictly a cost issue. We actually did a study with heavy reading of about 70 different service provider executives. And the surprising to us, while cost was still important, the number one issue was service agility. And what service agility brings is from NFV is that this service orchestration capability, the management network orchestration called Etsi-Mano capability to basically control these virtualized components. So in addition to taking these things that we know and love, things like PCRF functions or SBCs that are physical components and just virtualize them and put them in infrastructure, this is layering an architecture over top of it to manage the infrastructure that's really running that software. It's managing the individual VNFs that actually implement the network functions. And then also taking on the most important part is the NFV orchestration, is basically interfacing with the operations and BSS systems to basically do an end-to-end type orchestration. So we think that's very important capability. But when we talk about being simplistic, we have to be realistic. As was just mentioned, there's some functions that don't really fit well into virtualization at this point in the technology. For instance, we look at something like an SBC. SBC does a lot of signaling work, but it also does a lot of transcoding capabilities. Those things that are transcoding really don't fit real well into a virtualized environment in the current state of commercial off-the-shelf hardware. We don't think that's going to be the case in 5 years. We're working a lot of ecosystem partners basically to leverage commercial off-the-shelf systems to do it. But right today, the best or better answer is really trying to separate some of those functions that are the blocking and tackling of an SBC, like signaling and things like that, and firewall punching, and moving those into virtualized and be able to scale those, but at the same time be able to take the transcoding and put it into specific equipment that's basically dedicated to that. Yes, you can do it virtualized, but cost effectively it can be better done in specialized hardware. And we've actually deployed that with the European operator and built what we call pooled transcoding, with virtualized SBC and then pooling the transcoding function. So we realistically believe there's going to be a lot of physical network components that are still going to be needed to be incorporated. So you're going to have to address not only just these components that are not really easily virtualized, but also some of those functions that you have investments in your network. At Oracle, we really believe that it's an end-to-end business orchestration issue. You really have to think about the service itself and what the service and how the customer is going to view that service, and then work down how it's going to be instantiated and delivered and orchestrated onto the hardware. To that end, we've incorporated the NFV orchestration into our OSSBS system to leverage the same design studio, use drag and drop capability and workflows. We've also recognized that VNFs aren't going to just all come from Oracle. As much as our sales guys would love to say everything's going to come from Oracle, that's just not going to be the case. You're going to have to take VNFs from different vendors. So we created a plug-in architecture to our VNF manager so you can plug in different VNFs, specifying the profile and the KPIs so we know how to manage it, so we can manage these different VNFs, and we've demonstrated that multiple times. Also, we need to recognize that some of the NFV orchestration components that come from different vendors, the VNF manager, the NFV orchestrator, the VIM, you're going to have to work with different players. So we're actively working in standards bodies to define a lot of these interfaces, to standardize them. And also, we've done something really, it's kind of interesting recently in the TM Forum and the Catalyst project, where we took a look at how you orchestrate across multiple vendors. For deploying a carrier Ethernet was the example. We deployed that across the wholesale provider and the service provider, all in what we call a zero-touch capability. So we think this is going to happen on virtualized components, it's going to happen on private clouds, public clouds, but it's important to point out when you think about the public cloud in the context of communication, it's not the same thing as web services. You got latency issues, you have other issues to deal with that are not the same. You have to use statefulness in telecom applications or communications. So we believe a lot of that has to be taken into account, and that's what our Oracle Communications Cloud is really focused on. So we're excited about the opportunities ahead and look forward to participating with you forward.
Okay, thanks. I think you covered everything. I was writing down all the acronyms. So,
oh, yeah.
I'll
give you a few more.
As Steve said, I've been in the industry, he said 20 years, it's actually 22. And I've been an analyst most of that time. And it was always interesting because I get a new analyst who's new to the industry. And this is back in the days of GSM, Edge, TDMA, IS-136, et cetera. And they always used to panic because we had all these acronyms. And I always used to say, just, hey, don't worry, just wait 6 months. We'll have a whole new set of acronyms, and you'll be as confused as everybody else is. And I actually just wrote down here NFV, NFC, NFO, VNF, VIM, and that was just in 3 conversations. Ben, you did pretty well. So virtualization, a whole new set of acronyms. That's what it should be called. So with that in mind, let's kind of break this down a little bit. I think a couple of you mentioned the big operators are doing this. You know, we see the AT&Ts and the Verizons and Docomo, Telefonica, et cetera. So what can a smaller regional operator do here? How does virtualization apply to them? And the first question is really, where do you start with? I mean, they've got big networks here, complicated networks, and capital obviously is in short supply for everybody, large and small. So where do you start as a small operator, and where's the biggest, I guess, bang for the buck? Whoever wants to take, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I think first where you start, depending on where you are in the life cycle of this, maybe you just start with some education. Have a couple of deep sessions to familiarize yourself both with what the wireline operators are doing, people like AT&T, CenturyLink, Verizon, some of the larger cable operators, and on the wireless side, go through an identification process of what they are doing. I think there's some logical candidates to start with in terms of looking at this virtualization domain. But one of the one of the advantages of moving forward with virtualization, and by the way, I'll just go back to the previous comment or the previous discussion that we had. There are some network functions that it will, or some functions within the network that it won't make any sense to virtualize. We're not going to be virtualizing the core routers, for example. But there are some functions that it does make sense to virtualize. The packet core was raised, the mobile packet core was raised as an example. As we move into larger and larger numbers of machine-to-machine connections generating smaller and smaller amounts of revenue, you can stand up a virtual instance of a P gateway to serve that machine-to-machine traffic, and that's a good place to start on the mobile side. AT&T has set itself a pretty significant target as it moves forward with virtualization that by the end of this year, 2015, 5% of its network functions will be virtualized, and by the end of 2020, 75% of its network functions will be virtualized. So that's the kind of pace at which the larger operators are thinking of moving forward with the virtualization. One of the first applications of software-defined networking is on the wireline side, where we can stand up Ethernet networking services on demand, eventually VPN services on demand. So on the wireless side, maybe the virtualization of the packet core. On the wireline side, networking on demand services, either Ethernet networking or VPN networking on demand services that you can provide on a much more dynamic basis using an SDN controller to serve your enterprise customers. I would also say let's start looking at virtualizing the IMS core. As you want to start launching VoLTE services, perhaps you've got a small subscriber base. The subscriber base is too small to justify a full-on investment in an IMS core. Perhaps you can look at investing in a virtual IMS core, launching your VoLTE services on top of the virtual IMS core as a way to get in to that service on a much smaller footprint of subscribers. So just some ideas for how we can get the discussion rolling.
See, the temptation now to do my VoLTE joke, it's and it really just go on.
It's going to be better than that. It's going to be better than that.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
It better be. So let me.
You mentioned VoLTE, but you introduced it on me.
Yeah, I know.
Miguel?
Yeah, I'd like to add just a couple more points. I mean, it's right on. Education is number one, especially the smaller operators really need to understand what makes sense for them based on their customers, the needs of the customers, the relationships they might have with other operators, so on and so forth. Sometimes it may make sense to pool a number of smaller operators to have hosting of some of these capabilities based on regions or what have you. So all that is part of the business case development educational process. At the same time, though, I really believe that the best way to understand is to get your hands dirty and really get your feet wet. So, pick a proof of concept and go for it and try to understand how this thing works, what does it mean. As a matter of fact, in many cases, we talk about CUTs and virtualization layers and VNFs and all that stuff. At the end of the day, this is nothing more than a piece of hardware running software, all right? And it's just a different architecture that's being implemented. And many of the appliances today are already running on server-type solutions. The question is, how are they being used, orchestrated, managed? All of that is very important. To me, if you look at the edge services and components like firewalls and NATs and load balancers, those are very nicely defined, self-contained elements that perhaps are a good way for certain operators to start trying this type of technology. So, yeah, you have core. IoT is another area that is important, that's nascent. It's going to take time to really be, a huge revenue generator or larger, but it's also an area that he's correct. As you start going into some of these services, as they ramped, perhaps a virtual solution makes sense, and then obviously you evolve from there. At the end of the day, it's about understanding your business, your customers, what are your targets, what are the services you want to deploy, picking something that you believe will help you understand and train your staff, and then looking around and see if you can, partner with others to host some of these capabilities or even pool in how you do this to enhance, guarantee that you can truly reap the benefits of this type of technology.
Okay. Jim?
Yeah, just to add a little bit to that. I think one of the biggest hurdles to really instantiating a lot of this technology is just the operational aspects of it. So as we mentioned, you got to pick something. You got to pick an application and understand what the operational impacts of that are going to be to your organization, because now troubleshooting is much more, it's more complex, or it's different. Whether it's more complex or it can be made simpler over time is a function of the tools and the education that you can bring to bear on this. So there's a lot of the applications that we've mentioned. I think packet core is a very logical one. It lends itself well to virtualization. I think route reflectors for BGP route reflection is another one that makes perfect sense. You need to find one application that you sink your teeth into and then go and understand what the impact of the rest of the organization is going to be. You're not going to go turn a switch on and all of a sudden everything's virtualized. You need to understand how to troubleshoot it. You need to understand how to trace a packet. When you're in a virtualized environment, where do I go to find out what's wrong? So I think starting slow and understanding the impact of the organization, understanding what new skills you're going to need in your organization, because it's not trivial. And the guys that really understand virtualization are, there's not a lot of them out there who can walk up and down the Linux stack and understand what hypervisors are impacted, understand where to go look when things go wrong. So it's really a function of picking a battle, going and really understanding it well. And then from there, once you've learned how that's going to impact your organization, you can figure out how to expand that into the other parts of the business.
I just want to add something before we move down the line here. He brought an excellent point. Virtualization and this type of evolution will bring a change to your supply chain. You purchase, acquire, and do certain things, but also organizationally, telecom and IT merge, skill sets are different, will evolve. So you need to understand how all of that is going to affect your organization as well. That is all part of the learning process. So it's very important that that point be reinforced.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the supply chain. It's kind of interesting because I'd say that most people in the room are very familiar with Ericsson, Huawei, Alcatel-Lucent. Oracle, as you mentioned, Steve, to think of you differently. When I look at virtualization, I see Intel, Cisco, very, let's say, non-traditional, non-telecom companies. And then you see, obviously, other companies, a lot of smaller companies, newer companies that come into it as well. So it's a whole new set of problems. So, Steve, from an Oracle point of view, then, obviously, you don't look at the RAN, you don't look at EPCs as much, and where would you start with a smaller operator from a virtualization without mentioning any acronyms?
Okay, we would look at the Evolved Packet Core, otherwise known as the EPC. That's one, I'll try and spell them out. So Evolved Packet Core, we are involved in Evolved Packet Core actually to some extent, not maybe as fully as some of the other vendors, but when we are certainly there. But also the service plane is also another place to look. Service plane, which is mentioned, Evolved Packet Core, I think are ideal places to start. And I think it's already been touched on. It really depends on the appetite of the particular operator. What are their skill sets? I mean, these guys are dealing with physical boxes and plugging them together. Now you tell them you're going to deal with NFV. I mean, this is not something you're just going to be able to say, throw it in, and the next day and they're going to be able to do it. Right. So you're going to have to start small and test the waters. Start with a service, maybe a new service that you're bringing about, and what are the components that are associated with that service, and how does that have to scale and be elastic, be successful? And start with those things that are necessary for that. And that's what I would suggest. And then develop your skill sets, and then as you get the confidence in it, and as your budget allows, and your tolerance and your stomach allows for it, move forward.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'll open up. Any questions in the audience? I've got plenty more, but I can't see anybody out there. Steve dancing, is that enough of an incentive not to ask any questions? Okay, I guess so. Right, think about some, and but we'll move on. So I'm going to flip this around. I did send these guys some questions, but I'm going to insert one here. Obviously, from a consumer point of view, if you look at the advertising today in the wireless industry, it's very network-centric, quality-centric, capacity, speed. We have a lot of colors in wireless. Everybody seems to have a color. From a carrier going out there, virtualizing some part of their network here, and Steve, well, I'll start with you. Do you think there's any benefit to go to a consumer and say, hey, we virtualized this piece. You don't know what it means, but here's what it's going to do for you. Do you think there's a first mover advantage that can be gained there, or is this too much in the weeds?
I would hope the customer wouldn't care about that. I mean, when you think about it, this is something I'm pretty adamant about. I mean, a lot of times people talk about for example, my PC on my desk. I want to use it like a pencil. It's a tool to me. I don't really care what's running on it. I could figure it out. I have a background in that, but it's not what I'm using for. It's a tool. The same thing with the consumer. They just want to know the call goes through. They can get the internet access. They don't really care how you're making that work. So I think it's really should not be something that really should be even visible to the customer. It's really something internal for the service operator to basically determine how they can save costs and also create service agility.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Miguel?
Go ahead.
I mean, I would agree. I think the vast majority of the consumers out there don't understand it anyway. I think they're going to play it up regardless. I saw an ad recently, and I forget where it was, and I remember the vendor, but I won't mention their name. But it was basically one of the storage guys that was selling an off-board personal server, and they called it a personal cloud. It's called a hard drive. But so I think we're going to see a lot of that. But at the end of the day, I think the vast majority of the consumers, I mean, we all work in technology. Do any of your families really understand what you do?
No.
Most of us don't. So I think we'll probably see some of that, but I'm not sure how helpful it is. But I'm a technology guy, not a marketing guy, so.
There was a great Saturday Night Live skit that was done to basically spoof on how the wireless operators, and they specifically called out Verizon, how they talk about LTE and the different phones. It's terrific. You got to take a look at it. Look it up on YouTube. It really does bring it home about how these acronyms and the way we talk about things and how the consumer really has no idea.
Right. The interesting thing, though, is that still we are competing. The industry is competing in terms of how much signal bars I get, the strength, and the cost of the plan, and I can bring my devices. There's a number of different variables that I use. They still tout I have more coverage. You see all the maps and all the advertisements and all of that. I believe we are starting an evolution beyond that, and the reason is as we take 4G and 4.5G and 5G over the next 10 years, really we're going to migrate to what I call service-centric networking. The operator really doesn't care about the user doesn't really care what's underneath. They just want their services to be delivered with the best quality, on time, and fast. And when you go to the enterprise, it's the same thing. It's going to be relevant. So all the things we're talking about here, we talked about NFV, that's one of the components. As we evolve towards 5G, we're talking about network slicing and a number of other things. So all these are hyped acronyms today and concepts, but in reality, the objective is to bring you to the point where you don't have to compete on that traditional competition points, but really compete on how do I can deliver services better to you? How can you, as the end user, can take advantage of a network which is underneath something and create your own services? So I can do whatever I want, not whatever you are trying to sell me. That's the ultimate objective in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think there really is. There's a really important competitive point that I think all operators need to be fully aware of, and the reason why the operator base is starting to move down this path is both to get down the cost curve, dramatically down the cost curve, and to dramatically improve service agility, the ability to launch new services much more quickly. And the whole name of the game now is personalization of services. It's how Netflix has become so tremendously successful, is their ability to personalize content just for you, based on both the quality of their content, based on the quality of their user interface, based on the quality of their data analytics. Amazon has been able to drive a set of personalized services just for you. It's the way that they've been able to succeed, not just on the retail business, but also on the web services business. And this train is coming. This ability to uniquely personalize a set of services very dynamically, very programmatically in the network without having an engineer set up and tear down a service for you, so that it impacts everything. It starts with the virtualization of the network resources. It starts with the implementation of software defining those network resources, so I can set up and tear down services instantaneously and dynamically, and services that are tuned just for you. We would have the ability to set up and tear down network slices across the network, where a slice of the network resources is optimized for the application that's using that network resource. That's what's coming. That's what will be available in the next 3 to 5 year time frame. So if we can do that to the network, it means that we also have to upgrade the back office, the OSS system, to make it equally as programmatic and equally as dynamic. We need to upgrade the billing systems to make them equally programmatic and equally dynamic. And so imagine that, that 3 to 5 years from now, there will be the ability to do this very dynamically in the network, to set up services that are uniquely optimized for the application that's using those services. And we can do it instantaneously, not setting up a VPN over 5 to 7 weeks to provision that VPN in the network, but to do it dynamically. And If there are other operators that are moving forward with that capability, then it becomes a competitive reality that you need to move forward with that competitive capability just to remain relevant and competitive in the market.
Just one last point on that, bringing it full circle to the association. Let's say I'm an operator in Alaska. Who's better suited to understand what type of services I can deliver to my customers in Alaska? Me, that I'm a local guy, I know, and I can very quickly now provide those services, or a large guy that really doesn't understand the local market as well as I do. That's the dynamic that this will bring to you, and the ability to compete at the local level that, otherwise you wouldn't have.
Right. Good.
But again, to bring it back full circle to your original question, that's the marketing angle, not virtualization. All of the things you just talked about, how we're going to have instantaneous personalized services, that's what the consumer cares about, not the underlying technology.
Right. I joke, I have two kids, a 20-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old son, and they're both completely narcissistic. Who's skiing with I don't have a boat, we have the next best thing, which is a friend with a boat. And
it's even better.
That's great. It's fantastic. My daughter has the key for the dock. You go up, you get on the boat. She drives the boat. I ski. Anyway, we were out there with my daughter last week before she went back to college, and she had my wife take video of her jumping wakes and things. And on the drive on the way home, I'm like, "What are you doing?" Because she kept interrupting the music and playing in the car. She said, "I'm just uploading those videos." And she'd taken the video of herself, edited it, uploaded it in the 15 minutes we were driving home. And so completely personalized service, to your point, right? Went to all of her friends. I think by the time she got home, she had X number of Facebook likes and all the rest. But the concept of, certainly you mentioned Netflix, the concept of sitting down and watching a program at 7 p.m. on a Monday and waiting a whole week for another episode, that's crazy. What a ridiculous idea. Ridiculous idea, Ian. Yeah. Dad, you're so old.
Well, the real-time aspect is really something you've seen from the web, where it's not just bringing instantiating servers very quickly, it's also killing them. One of my colleagues mentioned that the thing you get with NFV and the rapid service innovation is that you basically get an opportunity to treat your services like cattle rather than pets. So if you decide that something's not working out, you kill it, move on. So it's an interesting concept, but when you think about it, that's what happens. I mean, I worked with one of the carriers for many years they would think about, I'm going to build this service. It took them years to even decide on. You can't do that. You have to decide what you're going to deploy. If it doesn't work out, you got to kill it.
On the next thing, absolutely.
It's cattle, not pets, right?
Cattle, not pets.
Not pets. Okay. All right. Any questions? We've got a few minutes left here. Is there one?
Right here.
It's really hard to see down here.
Right here.
Ah, yes. We'll bring the microphone to you.
So as a small carrier, right, I'm hearing these concepts. I understand what Verizon, AT&T doing, continually trying to figure out how to maximize their operations because they have huge hardware all over the country. I understand, I think most of us understand the cloud-based services as a services application that rides on top of their existing network. But a lot of these folks have, core networks in their MITSO, right? And then it sounds like to me you're trying to figure out how to change the way the operation levels work and turning it into a virtual machine, or taking all these pieces of the machines and kind of virtualizing each of those components and hypervising that operations of how they communicate and work together. If I have an LTE network sitting in my network today and I figured out how to make it work, which is a lot of them are just doing. Now you're talking about, now I got to try to figure out how to take what I have and somehow do some virtualization to something in the future in my hardware, P gateway, S gateway, signaling, and all the other stuff. They're doing pooled BBUs, and they call it a cloud now because they can stack them all in. Kind of walk me through, one of you guys, that if I have this network, how in the heck am I going to convert what I have into something that's realistic in a certain time period to be what I call a true virtual network? Because they're not virtual. I mean, they're virtual, meaning that they have a MITSO somewhere.
Yeah, no,
I mean, there's this transaction in my head isn't working right.
No, it's a great question, and I guess the answer is you don't have to. If you got it up and running today, it's good. Yeah. It's good. Leave it. You got an LTE network honing back to an LTE packet core. You're good. The reason why the big operators are moving ahead with virtualization is for tomorrow. It's not for today. And what's driving them is traffic is growing across the network at 50% year over year. And 50% growing to 70 or 80% of that traffic is video. And so I'm staring down this reality that my traffic is growing at 50 or 60% year over year, but my revenue is not growing at 50 or 60%. My revenue might be growing at 2 to 3% year over year. So I've got to find a way to get ahead of that. What's driving traffic growth? Well, one of the things that's driving traffic growth is more and more connected devices, connected cars coming onto the network. Well, how can I more cost efficiently serve those connected devices that are coming onto my network that aren't driving $50 or $60 of revenue per device? They're driving $10 or $15 of revenue per device. Is there a way that I can more efficiently set up a set of resources to serve those new customers that are just coming onto my network and will be coming on my network over the next 5 years? That's where virtualization comes in. So if you got a physical packet core in place and you got a physical, your LTE network in place, leave it. It works, great. Going forward, look at how your traffic model is going to change, how the traffic coming onto your network is going to grow, and how can I best serve the needs of that future growth? Is there a way that I might be able to use virtualization techniques to more cost effectively deliver against that traffic? That's where it's at.
Absolutely, and you know, if you're going to add more capacity, you have two paths. One, you can add more capacity cards to whatever infrastructure you have, or you can have a hybrid approach in which you start adding some of these new type of technologies, and we'll be able to manage that across as you continue to evolve your network. So the point is, you need to start thinking about, all right, I want to start moving down this path, and instead of ripping, it's not a rip and replace. It's not going to happen that way. It's going to be a gradual upgrade over time. So as you add new capacity and some of the things get obsolete, you add capacity in this mode, and the migration will happen eventually. That's one. We can discuss more afterwards. Yeah.
And I think we talk about the migration. It's something that's going to happen over time, but it's not going to recognize that you still have physical network elements in your network. You mentioned that, for instance, you got this growth in dating. You think that virtualization may be a better way to handle some of that. But you're not going to throw away what you already have. That's why it's really necessary when you think about NFV architecture, is to recognize that you're going to have physical network elements that are going to have to live within that same orchestration environment. So you're going to have to orchestrate your service across physical and also virtual components at the same time. So we think that's really important. That basically allows you to go as your budget and your stomach allows you to move forward.
Okay. All right, we're just about out of time. I've got one last question for them, and I'm going to go down and Steve, will start with you and go this way this time. So Glenn, you're going to get the last word. So can you put me 2 minutes back on the clock? We've got a counter up here. There's... What's that? I don't dance, Steve. Yeah. 4 panelists, 2 minutes, 30 seconds apiece, okay? If you go over your 30 seconds, then your neighbor, they get
more time to think about the question.
That's one thing.
I don't think you've got any problem coming up with answers. Yeah. We get it? No. Okay, we'll wait till we have to do this manually here. The question is, what keeps you awake at night? What wakes you up? What worries you about virtualization from a small operator perspective? 30 seconds, go.
I think it relates to the question that was just brought up, is the fact that their current skill sets that they have and the physical networks that they have, and basically getting them comfortable with understanding that it's not something they just have to do a nice switch, but actually setting forth a blueprint that know where they want to get to and providing a path along the way to get the skill sets involved and get the virtualization components involved to make it happen.
Very good.
That was 33 seconds, sorry.
30 seconds,
right.
go.
30 seconds.
Nightmare.
Troubleshooting the first big outage in a virtualized environment. That call that comes in at 2 a.m., the service is down. Where do I go now? Have I got the right tool sets in place? Do I know the right places to go to look for? How do I troubleshoot it? Have I prepared for this eventuality?
Okay, you guys are fast. Miguel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think skill sets. How do we help them move down the new skill set path? How do I learn to troubleshoot something that is completely different from the traditional telecom world that I lived in? That's an evolution that we really need to understand how to help everyone come up to speed with. So that to me is the biggest issue.
Okay, Glenn?
Well, I think two things. I think number one, don't ignore it. Don't ignore the trend because you're good today on the infrastructure that you have in place. Because I think that the ecosystem is moving in the direction of network function virtualization and software-defined networking. It's an undeniable trend that is going to drive more change and disruption in the network, over the next 5 years, I think, than we've seen in the last 20 years. So it's going to drive change. So don't underestimate the change that's coming. Second thing is, I do agree with the comment on skill set. It also changes the types of skilled resources that we need to have in our network and in our IT back office. The game is really changing from horizontal integration to horizontal and vertical integration, integrating the application onto different types of hardware platforms. I know, just give me 5 more seconds. To vertical integration. And so because the integration is now the challenge, we need skilled software resources that can deal with those integration challenges. And I think that's a key aspect that we need to be aware of.
Great. Steve, Jim, Miguel, Glenn, thank you very much. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you.
Water is
Thank
open
you
here.
one and all.
It's right
I
here.
appreciate it. It's very interesting. Good job. Hey, good. You got some movements here. I think we're going to do a latency requirement on Iain. A 2-minute overrun. I think that's $100 a minute. Or is it?
It's a racket.
It's a racket. Good job. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. A very informative, fascinating discussion. Obviously, it's going to change how we do business in the future. Now, let's quickly turn to the CCA's 2000.